Amendment by Mary González of El Paso.
Chair recognizes Representative González.
Mr. Speaker, members, we added this amendment in 2011 during the sonogram bill. I talked about this during HB1, but I think it's an important amendment that we should continue to consider. As you all know, I'm very passionate about the experiences of women on the border and women in rural communities being from a rural community. And I think one of the things that we haven't considered is the unexpected or unintended experiences or outcome for rural women. So if this piece of legislation were to pass, it would really close down any facilities in their areas. And we all say this bill is about women's health. Well, women's health means having access to safe and legal facilities. And so what this amendment aims to do is ensure that rural and South Texas facilities remain open and are able to continue to provide preventative care to patients who are often underserved. My amendment would exempt facilities that are located more than 50 miles from any other abortion facility. This amendment is considered the Rural Exemption Amendment.
So the gentlelady yields?
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Gentlelady yields, Ms. Markey.
Thank you, Representative. And I signed on to your amendment because I do have a concern about access, and especially along the border. Now, your amendment would allow there to be facilities along the border within 15 miles from the border. Is that what it does?
It allows, if there isn't a facility within a 50-mile radius, for that the U.S. to still use the current standards that exist right now.
Okay, so what would happen if, with this bill in place, how many miles would it take for a female to be able to have access to a facility if this bill were to pass?
If this amendment were to get on the bill, they would still have to potentially travel 100 miles round trip, but it's better than the 600 miles that could potentially happen, or forcing women to go into places like Juarez, Mexico, or Reina, Mexico, any other parts on the other side of the border.
So if this amendment were not to be placed on the bill, what would be some of the consequences as far as females seeking access, and where would they go if this amendment would not be added to the bill? What would happen? Could you just...
And I think that's why this amendment is so important. So what happens if we don't add this amendment? It means that women in my district and women in your district would have to travel hundreds of miles, up to 1,000 miles, to have access to a safe and legal facility in Texas, or they're going to have to go to Mexico. So, for example, doing in my district, we'll end up going to Juarez. In Juarez, there's a panel, a doctor, a priest, a lawyer, and then they even get permission to get an abortion. It becomes really inaccessible, so what ends up happening is a black market becomes created, because our research shows that abortion restrictions don't stop abortions, they make abortions unsafe.
Correct. And I agree with your amendment. That's why I signed on to it, mainly because my concern is that now you have females along the border who are not going to be able to have this access. And once again, the Rio Grande Valley and, of course, the females along the border is singled out. And now you're going to have facilities in San Antonio, Houston, Dallas. Why can't one of those facilities just be grandfathered into this system along the border? Would you agree? Would that be something that would be more amenable for the females seeking access for any type of procedure?
Definitely, especially if we're saying this is about women's health, then would we rather have women going to Mexico to get abortions, or would we rather have them doing them in either black market clinics? So it's really about making it about women's health and not making an undue burden on women on the border.
Thank you, and I think you have a good amendment.
Thank you, Representative Martinez.
Mr. King, for what purpose?
Lady yield for some questions.
Mr. González, do you yield?
A little nervously, but sure.
Gentlelady yield.
Thank you, Representative. I just want to make sure I understood the amendment.
Sure.
Yours says that it only applies to abortion clinics that are not currently within 50 miles of another clinic. Is that correct?
Yes. And I will say that we added this amendment in the 2011 sonogram bill.
Well, my question was, as I understand it, there are no rural abortion clinics in Texas today. I think there's only 42 or 43 clinics, and they're all in urban areas. So to what clinics would your amendment apply?
So it would definitely impact my district, which is considered a rural district.
Are there any abortion clinics in your district?
There's 2 abortion clinics in El Paso County.
And that's an urban area.
That's the entire county. No, it isn't.
But I guess trying to say they're within 50 miles of each other. Is that correct? Those 2 clinics.
Yes.
And so, can you? You characterize this as being for rural clinics and for folks that live in rural areas, but I can't think of any abortion clinics in the state of Texas that are in rural areas. They're all in urban areas. So I can't see how this amendment affects any existing clinic. Does it not also presuppose that all the clinics are going to close instead of upgrading to ambulatory surgical centers?
Actually, since this debate has started, I got information from the clinic in El Paso that said it would have to close if this bill were to pass. So you're asking women...
Do you have any other ambulatory surgical clinics in El Paso?
Let me finish my one sentence.
Certainly, I'm sorry.
It's okay. So women in my district who live out in the country would have to travel 600 miles to San Antonio in order to have access to a state facility, which is about 1,200 miles round trip.
But will your amendment change that?
My amendment will definitely change that because that one clinic in El Paso would be able to remain open and accessible to the women who live in the country in my district.
I know there's 437 ambulatory surgical centers in the state today, and there's only like 42 or 43 abortion clinics. Do you have any ambulatory surgical centers in your district? I'm not sure about ambulatory service centers in my district. Like I said, I have a rural district, so I'll have to look that up for you. I was expecting you, even in Weatherford, we have an ASC, but I guess my point is that you were characterizing this as an amendment to protect rural areas, and I guess I am correct that there are no abortion clinics in Texas today and never have been in a rural area. Is that correct?
I think access to rural communities is how we are trying to explain what we're saying. So the women who live in Socorro or Favens or Tornillo in my district would still not have access.
They don't today, and they would not with your amendment.
They do today, and they won't after this bill.
And they won't after this amendment because there's still no abortion clinics in those rural areas.
There are... Currently, right now, there are abortion clinics in Beaumont, McAllen, College Station, Midland, Harlingen, and Lubbock. And if without this amendment, all those places would close.
I don't understand why they would close because without this amendment. Because you're presupposing that they're not prepared in those urban centers to upgrade to ambulatory surgical centers.
From the information that we've gotten...
Do you not also presuppose that there are not existing ambulatory surgical clinics in those areas that they could contract with?
From the information that we've gotten, and I can specifically speak about the ones near my district, they have the inability to spend the millions of dollars that it will take to become certified under this new piece of legislation, and thus will have to close. And thus requiring women in my district to either travel over 1,000 miles or to go to Juarez, Mexico, in a place where there's already border violence, to get an abortion. I understand that we have pro-life individuals in this chamber. I am more than willing to understand y'all's position, but I'm also asking you to think of the unintended consequences of people who live in my district.
I understand. I was just looking at El Paso where you said they might have to close and wouldn't have clinics, but there are ambulatory surgical clinics. There's the Vista Surgery Center, East El Paso Surgery Center, Bassett Surgery Center, Endoscopy Center of El Paso Day Surgery, El Paso Center for Gastrointestinal Endoscopy, Surgical Center of El Paso, and Paso del Norte Surgical Center. All of those are ASCs within the district.
Within the county, not my district.
For abortion services within El Paso County.
Within the county, not my district.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Stickland, for what purpose?
Does the lady yield for her question?
Ms. González, do you yield?
Yes.
Lady yields.
Ms. González, you said something interesting a few minutes ago before the last exchange. I just wanted to ask you. You said that it was harder to get an abortion in Mexico than it currently is here right now.
I think that it is it is harder because not all states have illegal access, but what you see happen in Mexico is a black market for abortion. And in fact, the woman that I'm named after a few women in my father's and my mother's life. And one of the women I was named after died having an illegal abortion in Juarez, Mexico. So that's why I'm so passionate about this issue, because I've seen people in my own close family who have died having abortions in Mexico.
Are you aware of anywhere else in the world that it's easier to get an abortion than here right now?
Every country in Europe?
I know that
Not every country in Europe, but in Europe, in certain countries
because many folks have talked already about some European countries banning abortions at 14 weeks, 18 weeks.
Representative Price raises a point of order. The gentlelady's time has expired. The point of order is well taken and sustained. Chair recognizes Ms. Laudenberg in opposition.
Thank you, Representative González. And again, I move to table this amendment. This, as we have heard, really is not about the rural clinics, because as I read the list earlier, there are no rural abortion clinics. And what it would do is allow some abortion clinics to have standards less than others. And, that again is not fair to what we're trying to do to make sure that when a woman has her abortion, that it's done in the highest standard, highest quality environment possible, and all of them should be held to the same standard. So I respectfully move to table.
Representative Wu, for what purpose?
Well, gentlelady yield for a quick question.
Laudenberg, you yield.
Sure,
Gentlelady yield.
Representative Laudenberg, now you've soundly rejected and tabled almost every single amendment that tries to take some pressure off of the surgical standards and some of the emitting privileges requirements. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. Now, your statement is that you're doing this because you don't believe that there is any impediment and there will be no decrease in a standard of care for women in rural areas.
I'm sorry, say that again?
And you're saying
I didn't understand your question.
My question is, you have stated that you believe that the law as it is currently written will not cause a decrease in the standard of care for women in rural areas, in the Valley, in the Panhandle, in East Texas. Is that fair?
What I have said, Representative Wu, is that the standard of care for women at the abortion clinics should be raised to a standard of practice that is common throughout medicine for every other woman.
And you've said, and maybe I'm reading too much into what you've said, I believe you've said or intimated that the provisions in this bill will not decrease the standard of care or the access to care. Would that be fair?
This bill does not shut down any abortion clinic.
Fair. Would you take an amendment that says if more than half of the clinics that are existing in Texas do end up getting shut down, that this bill will be repealed?
Representative Wu, you're basing that on a hypothetical, and so the clinics in the bill, we have put a date there of 2014, September 2014, so they have well over a year to raise their standards. And
if by the application of this law, if the standard of care does decrease for Representative González's residents in the colonias, in the Valley, in the Panhandle, in East Texas, wherever, if the standard of care is demonstrably shown to have been reduced, would you consider repealing certain parts of the bill?
Representative Wu, again, this bill is not to lower the standard of care for anyone.
And that's not my question. My question is, would you consider repealing parts of the bill if it is shown that the standard of care has been reduced?
Representative Wu, I am very hopeful that we will pass this bill.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
hypothetical.
Mhm.
Proceed.
Let it.
I don't.